Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. If you would like to support this channel, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy the content. And now, let's start with the first story. It's called Revenge Gone Wrong. In 1999, I got a driving job delivering meat in Southern California. It was a tough job, dealing with traffic, and my schedule was always tight with 16 to 20 deliveries each day to local markets. I was mostly given inner city routes, with markets with limited space for mid-sized delivery trucks. One of my weekly stops was a small market, owned and run by an Iraqi immigrant. I will call him Ali. Ali was always scheduled to be my 5th or 6th stop, and would always complain to me that I would show up that late, after 9 AM each time. He said he wanted to be the first one of the day. I told him I knew he opened each day after 8 AM, and that I start my route at about 6:15 AM. Plus, I don't schedule my route. If he wanted to make sure he was the first delivery of the day, he would have to call Steve, our delivery route supervisor. Ali in fact called Steve, because the very next week I received special instructions that read, "Make sure Ali's Market is your first delivery of the day." I had my normal amount of stops that day, about 18. I knew they all will be pushed back at least 2 hours, because I knew Ali won't open until 8 AM, and he will not open the rear door until an hour later. The rear door was for deliveries and trash bin access. I began driving at my usual time. I arrived at Ali's Market 15 minutes later, and Ali's Market is closed. I had my orders. I will make sure Ali's Market is the first one of the day. I park and wait. 8 came and Ali shows up. He drives his old Benz around the back of my truck and parks and walks inside through the back door. I wait for him to open the front, and he ignores me. He was busy pretending to supervise the cashier, intentionally ignoring me. So I walk to the meat counter at the back. The guy tells me he was not allowed to take deliveries, and that I had to wait for Mr. Ali. At this point, I could have gone to make 2 or 3 deliveries and then return, but I had my very specific order. As I was walking towards the front to exit the market, I grabbed a newspaper and paid for it. Then told Ali, who was just standing there looking at me, "Let me know when you are ready to take your order. You know where I parked." Ali didn't say a word. He was apparently taking revenge for all these years for his small city market not being the #1 priority of a meat distributor, who delivered beef, pork, chicken, cheese, and other refrigerated products from over 12 distribution points throughout the United States. Steve arrived at his desk right after 10 AM. The first thing he saw on his computer screen was an alert of my truck sitting inert for 4 hours. He called me all in a rage, demanding I explain to him why my truck was sitting for all that time. I explained that I was following his order to make sure I delivered to Ali's Market first. Steve hung up and called Ali. Whatever Steve told Ali made Ali get out of his crabby little market and take delivery of his meat order, about 14 boxes of product. I then began to rush through the rest of my stops, not wasting time at all. At the end of my day, I was the last driver back to the warehouse. I got an extra $80 on overtime because Ali cried for not being the first delivery of the day. I never returned to see Ali again. Apparently, we dropped him as a customer. The next story is called Manager Approval. I was in my 3rd year of an accounting job I absolutely hated. I also hated the industry as a whole and was essentially using the position to bide my time as I learned a new skill to eventually jump to an entirely new career. My boss at the time was Tia. She was the shining example of the specific flavor of toxicity present in accounting. She was the first accountant for the company when it started. That is why she had become the de facto choice for the new highest position in the department, every time the company's growth called for a departmental restructuring. The only thing I could determine was earning her these positions was her confidence and conviction in the way she determined things needed to be done. C-Suite was even paying for her to get whatever training/certification she needed to qualify for the new roles presented to her. In the meantime, she'd given me 3 consecutive annual reviews, scoring a solid 0% satisfaction rate each time. It was always enough to justify a 0% raise, but never enough to justify actually letting me go. So at this point, I was fully checked out, especially after finding out I'd become the lowest paid employee out of around 100. including interns and a front desk clerk. In the latest restructuring, Tia was not promoted to the new CFO role, as the board wanted real experience. Instead, she was given a controller role, while a new level of management was added between us. HR had also become its own department, no longer falling under accounting's purview. Tia didn't seem to like simultaneously becoming second in accounting's command while also losing control of HR. She convinced the company to send her to law school. This way she could eventually transition into some kind of position that would oversee essentially everything the company did outside of actual production. This required her to leave the office around 2 to 3 p.m. every afternoon to attend classes, making her unreachable until the evenings. The new management position that opened between us saw 3 to 4 employees join and leave for greener pastures over the course of a year and a half. This took place while I was under the only manager I actually liked, who I will call Kevin. I could see him doing what he could to advocate for me while still being forced by Tia to treat me the way she had previously treated me. I could tell it made him feel awkward handing these decisions down my way. I respected his attempts to work with us, and he actually helped us create a functional department for a few glorious but short-lived months. Suddenly, a bill was passed in the US, stating that salaried employees making less than 40k per year would be eligible for overtime pay, taking effect later in the year. After 3 years of no raises, I was sitting at around 37,500 per year, making me eligible for the eventual overtime. Working in accounting, it's pretty much expected that you'll be working 50 to 60 hours a week, especially when closing out the monthly, quarterly or annual financials. However, after being shafted for so long and still being stuck with this work that had little effect on the actual financials, I was actively giving them as close to 40 hours a week as possible. I was only staying behind if we had gotten an important request towards the end of the day that Kevin begged me to take care of before leaving. I knew it would look a bit off if I suddenly started working a bunch of overtime after this change took place. I planned on very slowly ramping up my hours over the preceding months to eventually take advantage of the extra pay. After 1 to 2 months, I was regularly putting in 45 to 55 hours a week and looking forward to the income this new workflow would provide me. I guess they eventually caught on. Kevin pulled me into a conference room and presented me with a contract to sign, stating that I wasn't to work any overtime without Tia's approval. I quickly recognized this as a way to never have to work an extra hour for the rest of my tenure at the company. I signed it and immediately cut out all overtime, leaving at 4 p.m. that day as I'd worked through lunch. The next day, I stopped showing up early, started taking actual lunches, and could be heard peeling out of the lot at 5:01 every day. Kevin noticed my sudden lack of hours and tried to mention the contract not being in effect until the bill kicked in. I reminded him that we had a signed contract that failed to list a start or end date, so I considered it fully in effect. I could see the realization hit, but he begrudgingly accepted the loss. Later that week, an important client request came in around 4:45. He asked if I could stay behind to work on it, and I asked if he had Tia's approval. This was the second realization, as unfortunately, due to her classes, Tia had become unreachable between 2 and 8 p.m. every weekday for the foreseeable future. Usually, he didn't know he'd need extra work from me until after 4. Everything went exactly to plan, as I got to enjoy a comfortable 40-hour week, throwing the contract back at them anytime they tried to squeeze even an extra minute out of my time. Before the new bill took effect, a judge blocked it and shut it down entirely, meaning no more overtime pay for salaried employees. A crippling loss for the workforce, but I at least still got to enjoy my new schedule. Management tried to claw back my hours, but hey, I still have a contract that says I can't. Sorry guys. I was finally pulled into Tia's office, who tried to explain the lack of necessity for the overtime approval now that the overtime bill wouldn't be coming into play. I again reminded her we had a signed contract, with no dates and no mention of this being in relation to impending overtime law. Then came my favorite part of the conversation. So, yes, this is still a valid contract, but I want to be clear that it doesn't override your original employment contract here with us. You mean the employment contract that states 40 hours a week? And that was that. I was eventually let go a few months later, after replying, because I don't, when the CFO mentioned people saying I look like I don't care about my job. But I'd finally built up my skills enough to find a position in my new industry, while still enjoying my severance, so I consider it a win. The last story is called Blanket Policy. I work from home most of the time, Recently, I had to file an expense report for mileage, since I drove my vehicle to a specific location for work. I had previously calculated my mileage using the location I actually left from to get to the location I'm going to. This was usually my home to whatever venue I'm going to for work. I assumed this was the rate that made the most sense. This particular event was less than 20 miles from where I live, so I submitted the mileage from my home address as that's where I left from. My expense report was then sent back to me, stating it needed to be amended. The message read something like, "Per company policy, mileage must be calculated as if you were going from the office and not your home address. Please adjust accordingly and resubmit." I think to myself, well, that's dumb. Move on and resubmit as though I am leaving from my work address. Turns out the office is a little more than double the distance to the location I went to, compared to the actual distance I traveled leaving from my house. So the company policy made what would have been a $30 reimbursement a $60 reimbursement. Guess that's what you get for having a blanket policy that needs to be followed no matter what. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and want to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.